Hello, I've shown this camcorder before. It's one I've modified, and the reason is that sometimes 8mm tapes can be recorded with an alignment fault. Well, it can happen to lots of formats, but in particular it happens to these because Sony wouldn't always lock the guides very securely inside the deck, and at times they would start to loosen off and wind themselves up or down their adjustment pillars, and you'd finish up with a situation where a recording is made that would play on the original camcorder but not properly on any other. You get disturbance very often at the bottom of the picture or elsewhere, caused by the tracking being too far out for the automatic tracking of the camcorder to recover. And this particular camcorder, I've drilled some holes so that I can access the adjusters for the input and exit alignment pillars on the head drum. And this is a Digital 8 camcorder. It's a TRV120E, which is ideal for this because, as well as the fact it can play NTSC and PAL tapes, it has a firewire output, so it can digitize the tape and I can feed that straight out to the video capture system. So there's a lot to be said for this particular camcorder. However, all the adjusting with this tool, and you could use a screwdriver, but all the adjusting with this tool has messed up one of the guides, and I need to fix it. It may be unfixable. Let's have a look and see what I've done to it. So if we just try to play some random tape that's in there, it detects it as an analog recording. Be aware that not all Digital 8 camcorders can play analog, but we're not getting any useful playback. And you can see there are multiple mistracking lines. This is a separate problem to an issue you can get where the cables between the head drum and the lower PCB don't make contact. I've covered that before too. But this is an alignment fault, and the problem is that however hard I try to twiddle the guides here, I can never get the alignment back in. So I think I'm going to have a close look at what's happening to those guides when I adjust them. And I suspect they're not, or one of them is not moving, and I think it's the exit guide. So let's get a bit of access to this with a microscope, and let's have a look at whether I'm managing, when I adjust this guide, to make it travel up and down the adjuster thread. If I take this cover off for a moment, it should give us more or less the access we need, but we may have to take all the rest of the covers off later too. Okay, what are we looking at here? We're in the unlaced position, so the carriage is back here and open. We have the exit guide adjustment here, and there's the pinch roller and another guide here. So, and over on the other side we have the input guide adjuster. They appear all sloppy now, you know, like they're not going to work, but that's just because it's not laced. When it's fully laced up, these guides are driven up into the back here, and they're held in place by the deck here. So there's not a fault, the fact these are wobbling around. That's just the way it is at this point. Now, my problem seems to be that I haven't got any adjustment on this guide. It looks like it's driven fully down. Can you see that? It looks like it's driven all the way down to the bottom here. So if I put my adjuster in there, is it coming up or is it jammed down the bottom? Oh right, it's just spinning. Has it gone off the bottom of the thread somehow? Perhaps I just need a small screwdriver to push it back into place. Could it be as simple as encouraging it back onto the threads? I'm just giving it a little bit upward force when I'm rotating it, hoping that it might start to travel upwards. So I'm trying to turn it anti-clockwise to make it travel up, and I'm using this pick to push on the bottom of the guide. It's working. Oh, there's a surprise. It went up. Yes. Now, clearly the guide is in terrible shape now, but I can adjust it. What about the other side? Again, that's rammed to the bottom, it appears. So this is the input side. Ah, but that one is adjusting properly. So if I was to put a tape in now, could I get the tape to play? So now I'm going to be adjusting the guide slightly through these holes that I've drilled into the cabinet. You see it's still misaligned badly. It has about 3 mistracking bars, but that's better than it was earlier. Bearing in mind, we're not trying to do, precision alignment on this. We're just trying to get it back ballpark so it can be used for customer tapes that have alignment errors. Well, try as I might, I cannot get this aligned, and I think the reason is, you look here, the exit guide, it's reasonably taut, I can't wiggle that around, but the input guide is all over the place, it's floppy. So there's a problem with the input guide, something is broken on that input guide, I think. We'll have a look at it under the microscope, but I think that will be hard to fix. So the way I'll do that is I'll get it to lace up. So this is the input guide in its laced up position, but it appears to be very woolly indeed. Something's not right with that. The output guide is reasonably properly fitted into the end part of the lacing sequence, but the input guide is all over the place. Why is it so sloppy? Feels like it's not been pushed hard enough. It's not pushing up firmly into place. Let's go and compare that to a known good machine. Okay, here's another one. This is a slightly different model and it's actually NTSC, but for these purposes it's exactly the same. We'll have to take this lid off and then we can lace it up and have a look at what that guide looks like. So that's much more securely mounted there. There's no slop in that laced up position at all on the input guide. Let's look at the exit guide as well. And the exit guide's a bit harder to see, firmly in its laced up location there. But the input guide in particular is what I'm looking at. It's really locked into place there. There's no slop at all. Well, I think we have to take the deck out, and that's not easy on these machines, but let's have a go. I don't like taking Sony camcorders apart, and I don't think I've ever got so far down as to strip the deck out before, but just don't have any options here. Again, just show you what the problem is. This guide here is sloppy. The exit guide, the base of the guide is pushed firmly into its location here. So if I try to wiggle the black plastic block, it's going nowhere. But on the input guide, that's not supposed to be happening. Okay, that's separated the two halves of the unit. Let's undo this flexi cable here most carefully. Part of it dismantled, but I still haven't separated the deck from the main PCB here. Well, I think I've identified at least where part of the problem is, and I don't think I can fix it. So Remember, our issue is that this guide is not being taken fully home here when it was laced up. Let's drive the mechanism a little bit with a few volts on the loading motor here. So I'm going to unlace slightly, which I think is this polarity. Okay. Partial unlace. So the way the mechanism works is that this whole carriage slides in during the lace up, and the guides are driven forward by nothing complicated. These guides are driven by arms that are attached to the carriage mechanism, and they're just swinging arms. They're not driven by some sort of cam arrangement as would be on, say, a VHS deck. So they simply get driven forward when the carriage comes in. If you look at the service manual, you can see that. The service manual unfortunately doesn't help us very much in actually dismantling this. It leaves us completely at a loss as to how to take this apart. But let's lace it up. Right, that's fully laced. This is as far as it'll go. If we look at the exit side, you can see here this is part of the moving carriage. This bridge assembly is mounted on the carriage and leaves a small gap there and has driven the block all the way to the end of its travel. But on our problem side, we seem to have a significantly larger gap between the carriage endpoint and we're all of a slop. But if I grab hold of the carriage and give it an extra little bit of a push, lo and behold, our block is now securely mounted. Look, no problem. And the gap there is similar to the other side. And we can also see over here, can you see that screw? Let me try and get you set up on that screw. That screw has reached the end of the travel when I give it a little bit more of a push. There we go. And you can see where the grease is. So I think our problem is that we're not reaching the end of the travel properly. We just need a little bit more of a push, which could be something a tooth out, or something's bent or worn. We're not quite managing to get this side to go as far as it needs to, and it's not because of a sensor telling it to stop, because when I was powering it on the motor we weren't using any sensors. So it's nothing like that. It's that the carriage has possibly become a tiny bit twisted, or there's a gear slightly not in place, so that it's not driving the carriage far enough, especially on this side. And that's causing our first guide here to slop around. So when I let it go, this guide is sloppy, and when I push it in that extra 0.5 millimeter, it's fully driven in, and you could set the alignment properly. So that, I believe, is our problem, but I have absolutely no idea how to fix it. And if you look at the service manual for this thing, it gives you some sort of exploded diagrams, but it doesn't give you much in the way of information on how to take it apart. I've seen a few online things, and I've seen somebody strip one of these down, not this model, but a 8mm machine from Sony, and they stripped everything out the back, and you don't really get very much access at the back. You can get to see the back of the mode switch, and that's about all. So you wouldn't go in through the back. You'd have to take something out on this front. I thought, okay, I'll take the bridge off, and I came up with this idea last night. I'm calling it a bridge. So undid these two screws, and it didn't go anywhere, and I think the reason is I think there's some springs connected at this end, so I couldn't just force that off. This plate here, it might be possible to remove that. there's some screws and they're marked 1, 2 and 3, and I've managed to find 2 and 3 but not number 1. And if I take that off, well, you'd have to be careful because it's got the infrared transmitter lamp, if you like, in the middle there for the auto stop system mounted on it. You could take that off and undo those screws, but what more access would you get? Not really much. I think what you'd need to do to really work on this is to get the whole of the carriage assembly off, and the service manual, at least the one I've got, doesn't seem to explain how to do that. So I don't know what to do. There might be a service manual somewhere for just the deck rather than the service manual for the whole unit, and that might explain in more detail how to strip this down to its component parts. Some of the components within this top section are not available. The whole top section is sold as a single unit by Sony, or was back in the day. So even if I find I need a part, I probably can't source it anyway. It'd be looking at replacing the whole of the top mechanism. It's too big a job for me anyway. Perhaps people who've worked on cameras a lot might have a better idea what to do here. Perhaps 12-volt Vids does. But it's beyond me. So I need a solution for some kind of 8mm deck which I can play misaligned tapes with and set the input and output guides from the head drum. And it would need to be Hi8 because it's just as likely to get Hi8 tapes as Video8 tapes with misalignment. Preferably in stereo, because of course some of the tapes could be stereo, but that might be optional. Preferably with digitization built in, but I could digitize externally if I had to. Preferably with NTSC playback, because I could get misaligned NTSC tapes, and I think I've had that once or twice. So what can I do? Let's have a look and see what other machines I've got. So I've gone down into my storeroom to find a couple of machines which potentially one of these might be my replacement for the purpose of playing back misaligned tapes. So here we have as a Hi8 machine, TR713E. It doesn't have a display on it, so that's a nuisance. Only this viewfinder, which may be black and white, so that might not be ideal from that point of view. It's analog only, so it won't play digital 8 tapes, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. But I could digitize the output from this. One thing though, it's mono, so that's not ideal, but let's just give it a whirl and see what it does. So I'll have to plug it into a monitor so we can see anything. Runs on the same kind of power supply, I think, yes, and takes the same kind of batteries as the digital 8 ones. So let's first start, see if it works. Well, I like the fact you can leave it in play mode, that's handy. Very much the same kind of deck inside. So put in a random tape and see if it plays okay. Okay, let's try that. I don't know where it is on the tape, but that's a PAL tape and that seems to be playing just fine. Picture search. Looking good. It's annoying not being able to see the tape. Can I take this off? Oh, it's a metal piece behind there. So it's not as good as that design, is it, where you can actually see the tape position? No, I don't like that very much. Okay, so that's a strike against it. You're a bit lost. But otherwise, that seems okay. Let's try an NTSC tape. It's not a given at all that a PAL camcorder will play an NTSC tape. Should play in NTSC 4.43. Yep, that seems to be there. Okay. You might be seeing some flicker on that because of course it's 60 Hz. But yeah, that plays. So it could be used for NTSC and PAL. There's a menu system on here, I think. Let's go through that. It may only be on this display. I'd have expected it to come out on the TV as well. But one of the options there is NTSC playback. These are always very troublesome, these. The options are actually NTSC playback on PAL TV and NTSC 4.43. Not quite sure what the difference is. But anyway, we have NTSC playback. Not many other features on here though, but that'll do. So I think that would be a perfectly adequate player for misaligned tapes. So what I would do is take this off and drill out holes in the correct places there to line up with the head guides. And I'm quite tempted. That is quite tempting, that one. Okay, it's mono, which is probably the biggest letdown, but apart from that, it's very good. Oh, I've just realised something. Something's missing. There's no S-video connector. Surely all Hi8 camcorders should have an S-video connector. It's only got composite. Granted, if you've got misaligned tapes, you're happy to get whatever you can. Mono sound and composite video, especially when it goes through one of my digital time-based correctors with digital comb filters. The quality loss is fairly small, but it might be nice to avoid. Let's see if we'd be better off. Oh, the battery's working. Let's see if we'd be better off with this. So it's Digital 8, DCR-TRV830, so one of the later ones. Very big display on this one, huge display. Let's give this one a whirl. Well, it's what I call a bottom feeder. Which could make it very hard to get to those alignment posts, because it could be in here. I don't know where the volume control is. There it is. So this, of course, has firewire out. In fact, this one's got firewire in and out. Let's check NTSC. Yeah, I'd need an AV cable to connect it to a monitor. I'm not too worried about that. And it does NTSC as well. So it's a better unit in many ways, but I'm not sure how accessible the alignment would be. I'll start by just taking this off and see what we can see. Okay, the entry and exit guide posts for the head sit underneath here. I really don't think I'll be able to access those. Oh, and what's more, there's a metal screening can above them. This screening here. So I'd have to drill through the metal. No, that's not on. So that will not be my realignable deck. Definitely not. Let's reassemble that one. Okay, so competent though that is, it's not suitable for this job. So back to the analog one. This is going to have to be it. Let's just take the door for a moment, see what we can see. So I'm going to have to drill that here and here to gain access to the input and exit guides. But before I do that, I've just found this. So it's TR728E Hi8, and this does have S-video, but it needs its own AV output cable for the audio, but I've got those. So perhaps we should have a quick look at this one. Again, it doesn't have a pull-out display, which is annoying. And I'm going to have to find a way to connect this up to the monitor. So, okay, let's just test it runs mechanically first, and if so, I'll connect it to this TV and we'll see where we are. Okay, again, very much the same deck. Playback seems to be fine. Okay, let's get a cable for it and see what it looks like. Okay, so disappointing things about this one, it is mono only, which is just unhelpful, but that's the way it is. It also means that if I use this kind of stereo cable, I only get audio out of one of the audio jacks, which just makes connecting up harder. So that's a right pain, but you do get to see the tape, that's good, and it has got S-video, that's good. I think this is a better one to use. It also gives better results than that one. It's also got a time-based corrector. So if a customer has a tape that's misaligned, at least with this one I can play it back properly, albeit the sound will only be in mono even if their tape was stereo, at least for the time being, until perhaps we can come up with one of the other solutions. But you know, how many tapes do I get that are misaligned? Relatively few. And then how many of those would actually be stereo anyway, or that the stereo even matters? Most people are just glad to be able to still see their content, because usually other video transfer businesses say it's misaligned and I can't do it. Right, so let's set ourselves up to drill holes out on this one. Okay, that hole is drilled right above the guide, but it's a little bit too small to put the adjuster tool in. It'd probably fit for a screwdriver, but it's not what I'm looking for. So I'm going to open that out somewhat. Well, that one's nicely lined up on the adjuster. We're now doing the second one, which is a little bit harder to find, and you have to be careful with the drill, of course. You mustn't let it plough in and hit the deck. So this does require a certain amount of care. Good job for a pillar drill if you have one. Right, again I've got that straight above the adjuster, I think. Right, I'm a few millimeters away from where I need to be. I'm slightly further in that way, so I'm going to open the hole out in this direction. I'm going to use a soldering iron to help me a little bit to start the whole opening procedure. A bit smelly, but it does give you a certain amount of control. Okay, that's absolutely lovely. The holes now are better placed than they were on the previous one, so that the adjuster just sits nicely on top of the adjuster without so much risk of it sliding around. And that's still working fine. Good. Spot the deliberate mistake then. When we close this, that one gets covered up by this plastic work here. So we can either leave this off or cut a piece of that off. I think it's easy enough to cut some of that off, isn't it? Okay, having cut that off, I think we can clear the adjustment hole we need there. Let's just prove it. Perfect. Okay, so we can get to the adjusters easily now. So people have asked me, where can you get hold of the tools for adjusting the head guides on these? Well, the answer is in these kits. I bought these on eBay and I paid £10–12 each for them, and there is the tool, and there's other tools in here for example setting back tension on various things, and there's a head puller and other useful tools in here as well. And you might say, well, you know, you'd be a bit lucky to get hold of one of those. Sometimes these things go for serious money. Well, I picked up another one on eBay, and this was slightly different sort of texture, but very much the same sort of thing. And the tool we're talking about is there. So I've got at least two of these things. Well, you might say I've been super lucky getting hold of the two of those for sort of £10–12 each. You'll never get hold of those things, will you?
Special delivery.
Ooh, what's in this? Let's have a look. Oh, this one's a bit grubby. Ugh. Okay, it's been in somebody's shed or something. But let's open it up. I genuinely haven't looked in this. Ugh, it's disgusting. But there's the kit, and there's another one of these adjusters. No, I'm not going to sell any of these, but you could probably make up your own using a flat bladed screwdriver and cut a slot into it. But you can definitely get hold of these kits if you're patient and look on eBay, and don't spend too much. Sort of limit yourself to sort of maybe £15 or so. That idea of making up your own one of these from something like a screwdriver isn't such a bad one either. This is the tool I've been using with some success, and let's have a look at that under a microscope. The cutout seems a little ragged, almost as though somebody's modified that. Well, I think they might have, because here's one which is from one of the other kits. So I suspect that someone's modified the one above there so that it fits better. Probably just filed it out slightly. So making up your own might be the way to go anyway. I'm not going to be actually running any tapes on this today where I set up the alignment to match the tapes. I did that in my previous video, which will be linked below, which is when I did set up the previous machine, which is now ruined, for playing misaligned tapes. They weren't a long way out, and it wasn't too much adjustment to get those particular tapes to play. I think that possibly some of the damage that's happened to that other deck has been because I've been attempting to play tapes that are massively out of alignment, and it means too much adjusting of the guides. And I've now convinced myself that if any tapes have got more than one mistracking line on the bottom, typically it's the bottom of the picture you see it, then they're too far out. If you've just got a bit of noise at the bottom of the screen typically, then I'm prepared to adjust this one to match a recording which is just a fraction of one track out. But when you get multiple lines of mistracking, I have on occasions in the past been able to recover those tapes with a great deal of improvement, not necessarily perfect, but I think the risk to my equipment is too great, and I'm afraid going to have to say no in future for recordings that have got massive misalignments. Right, I hope you've enjoyed what we've done here today. I will do plenty more content on audio and video technology in the near future. Bye for now. Other tools in these kits then, there's lots of these small adjusters that are used for setting back tension. So this would sit next to the back tension arm, you'd slacken off a screw on it, and this allows you to increase and decrease the back tension. You really need a back tension gauge to make good use of those. I don't know what all of these tools are. There's an interesting one here with like a square peg on it, don't know what that's for. Another head adjuster there. Another odd peg one there, so I don't know what they're for. This is a head puller. Some, I think primarily VHS heads, you had to use a device like this to get the head off the lower drum. That looks like an IC socket puller, that one. We've got some Allen keys and screwdrivers and bits and bobs. Oh, let's have a look in there. There's something interesting in this one. Wow, some of the tiniest Allen keys I've ever seen in my life. That is absolutely tiny. An extremely small precision screwdriver. Look at that. Of course, some of these kits, some of the tools will have been lost over the years. But yeah, it's nice that.